So before we get into today's video, I want to give a shout out to a must-read for any Christian. It's the book Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Lewis is a brilliant ex-atheist intellectual. He became a Christian and actually one of the greatest defenders of the faith. He brings a brilliant yet easy to read and understand depth to the Christian faith. His book is really not specific to any denomination, but rather explores the ideas that generally unite all Christians. It's really a must-read. If you have never read this book, go to Amazon right now and look up Mere Christianity and either get an audio or paper copy today. So a few years ago, I made a video about Islam, and with the recent events happening in the Middle East, I figured I would re-release it, as I think it's important for Latter-day Saints to have a clear view of how Islam is understood by Muslims around the world. So in a recent address, Elder Bednar and Elder Gong announced a new pamphlet that the church is coming out with in order to help members of the church understand and relate better to our Muslim brothers and sisters. And I fully support this kind of thing. I'm actually a big advocate for interfaith work and for trying to find common ground between different faith groups. In addition, it's my belief that the reason for the creation of this pamphlet is ultimately because the church is growing internationally, and we're rubbing shoulders with Muslims more and more as this happens. And that's only going to increase with time as the church continues to expand. So it makes perfect sense, and I totally understand where they're coming from with this. Now, it should be noted that we have been encouraged to understand both the similarities and the differences between ourselves and Islam. And I'm sure that the church will do an excellent job of showing legitimate similarities that we should take into account and we should use to build bridges, between us and our Muslim brothers and sisters. Interactions with any person of an alternative belief system should start from a place of common ground and with mutual respect and understanding for the things that you have in common. Now, I have done a little research on Islam in the past, and I really enjoyed it. But I'm planning in the coming months to do a little bit of a deeper dive in order to get to know the faith better. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that in my previous, good faith exploration of Islam, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I had found some really significant and meaningful differences between ourselves and Islam. And this isn't just in matters of theology, but in practical things, in the way that Islam affects people's attitudes and values. Now, obviously, we have differences with all other religions and groups that are out there, but I think it stands to reason that our differences with Islam are more fundamental. I mean, just at a glance, we can notice that our missionaries are banned from nearly all majority Muslim countries. No other religion is doing that. Now, like in Christianity, you can find a wide variety of different Islamic denominations and ideas about Islam. The common response to anyone pointing to something problematic within Islam is to say, well, not all Muslims believe that. And that's true. It's also what's known as the no true Scotsman fallacy. Go ahead and look that up. The trouble is that you could never say that all Muslims believe anything, because there is no universal consensus on Muslims on almost any topic. But does that mean that there's no such thing as Muslim beliefs? Of course not. It's perfectly reasonable to say that if a particular idea is held by a majority of Muslims and is consistent with the Quran, then it's fair to call it part of Islam. So how can we find out what most Muslims believe? Well, we could ask them. And Pew Research, probably the most respected and rigorous research institution for public opinion research that's out there, conducted a 4-year study in 39 countries doing just that. They did over 38,000 interviews with Muslims in order to basically ask them what they feel on a wide variety of questions. This is likely the largest and most comprehensive dive into the beliefs and attitudes of Muslims ever conducted. And it went straight to the source and just asked them. Now, I've linked below a link to that study. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm going to go through some of this study, and I'm going to point to some of the things that I found rather concerning and that I think kind of explain why we're not even allowed to preach the gospel in these countries. You see, Christianity has a long history of separating the church and state. Our church itself believes in political neutrality. However, this is a Western idea. This is a Christian idea. Islam is not Christian and it's not Western. Islam is ultimately more similar to a lot of older traditions that see state and religion as one and the same. And they seek to implement the religious vision through the power and force of the state. The majority of Muslims actually believe that the Quran and Sharia law is divine revelation, and that there's only one interpretation of that, and that Sharia should not only be the law that governs the religious aspect of a Muslim's life, but the civil law of the land. 40% believe that civil laws and punishments of Sharia should not only apply to Muslims, but should apply equally to non-Muslims. Now, some may say, well, there's a lot of different interpretations of what Sharia law is. The people who did this study anticipated that. And so they went and asked them, according to Sharia law, as you understand it, how should things be? For example, anywhere from 20 to 50%, depending on the country. Again, this is tens or even hundreds of millions of Muslims believe that the Islamic rule of stoning adulterers should be the law of the land. And before you think this only applies to places like Afghanistan, keep in mind that a majority of British Muslims in the United Kingdom, when they were surveyed by the Guardian newspaper, reported that they believe that homosexual behavior should be illegal and punished by the state. Shockingly, honor killings of women, that's where a woman is killed because she dishonored the family, because she broke the law of chastity and had premarital sex. Now, depending on the country, it's anywhere from 30 to 60% of Muslims believe that that can sometimes be justified. Even in places in Eastern Europe, like Kosovo and Russia, the percentage was as high as 40%. These are not some white supremacist lies. These are literally what the Muslims themselves are saying when they've been surveyed and asked these questions by the most credible research institutions out there. It's one thing to have a voluntary private faith that people can join and submit to, but it's quite another when you are trying explicitly to take over the state that we're all subject to. Now, what about those wonderful, kind, and nice Muslims that you have met? What about the moderate Muslims who don't embrace these sorts of ideas? What about reformers like Imam Tawhidi? Personally, I think they're wonderful. Islam has given them a lot of the same beliefs that we have. But keep in mind that they are moving away from the ethics of Muhammad and the explicit reading of the Quran toward the ethics of Christ. We fundamentally believe that it is Christ who is the light and life of the world and the measure of all progress. So if these people are progressing or getting better, it's because they're becoming more Christian. So what should our attitude be as Latter-day Saints towards Muslims and Islam? The same as it is towards all other religions. Let's come together and build on the truths we both have and not impose our wills on each other. The challenge that we face, the special challenge we face with Muslims, is that so many of them reject that idea. This is the challenge that we face when we approach many Muslim majority communities and countries around the world. In the end, they don't believe in allowing our missionaries in and having that conversation, and they fully believe in using the state to impose their religious laws on their society. In fact, in many places with high Muslim populations, we don't even baptize Muslims even when they request it, because it may put their lives in danger. Let's not go down the cultural relativist rabbit hole of seeing Islam as just as good in its effects and ideas as any other faith, including our own. And that's also why I fully support the outreach and goodwill towards Muslims at all levels of the church. We need to build bridges of friendships with our Muslim brothers and sisters. And I'm glad that the leaders of the church are reaching out to moderate Muslims. I actually think that the gospel has incredible potential amongst moderate Muslims. If we ultimately want to bring the gospel to the Muslim world, we need to find and support those who are willing within Islam to reinterpret it away from the 5th century ethics of Muhammad and the explicit readings of the Quran towards interpretations that are more enlightened by the light of Christ. So do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it.